Let's go ahead and take a look at 1.3, finding areas. Now you're going to have to use the areas of shapes that you already know, shapes that we've already talked about, rectangles, parallelograms, and triangles, to name a few. Some of these shapes, like if you look at number 2, that is a shape that you should already know. That is a rhombus. However, we are not going to use the equation for a rhombus. We're going to use different techniques to find those areas. So first of all, part A asks you to find the area of each figure. You should have, or if you go to my website, if you do not have it, a lab sheet. And on this lab sheet, I would highly recommend having this lab sheet, or else I want you to copy them on dot paper or graph paper so you can actually draw on top of them. Go ahead and find the area of each figure. They get harder as they go on. You should be okay with the first and maybe second rows, but 8, 9, and 10 should cause some trouble. Okay, and my recommendation is, like for example on number 2, what you're going to do is, instead of using the area of a rhombus, you're going to break it up into 2 different shapes. So for example, here you have a square with sides 1 and 1, and so this area and here is 1 times 1, which is 1. Here you have a triangle, which with side 1 and 1, height of 1, base of 1. Remember, the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height, so this area is equal to 1/2. So the total area is going to be 1.5 units squared. So on some of these, you might have to get creative and cut them up in a way, which is why I want you to have this lab sheet. I'll go ahead and pause the video, take a couple minutes, probably about 5 to 10 minutes, and see what you can't do finding the areas of these figures. Okay, like I said, some are harder than others. If we just go over some of the easier ones and the answers, you should have 2 units squared here. And remember, area is always units squared. And on number 3, well, look, that's just a triangle. That's 2, and it has a height of 2. So it's going to be 2 times 2 divided by 2, which is 2. So this also is 2 units squared. And so this one, number 4, you have to start getting pretty crafty. But if you make a square here, a triangle here, square here, another square here, and a triangle there, and find those areas, you should have come up with 4 units squared. And again, if you haven't tried these, please pause the video and try them before you kind of watch my solutions, because there are more than one way to do these problems. Like for example, in 5, what I would do is I would just make 2 identical triangles. So this has a base of 3 and a height of 1. This too has a height of 1. And so each one of these triangles has the area of 3/2. Because it would be 3 times 1 divided by 2 for the area. And since there are 2 of the triangles, you would just double that, and then those 2's would cancel. And so the area of this parallelogram is going to be 3 units squared. Okay, on this one, what I would do, again, there's many ways that you can go about doing this, but I would go ahead and make this triangle. So this is 1, 2, 3. The base is 3, and here's your height, and your height is just 1. So 3 times 1 divided by 2, so this has an area of 3/2. And then I would go ahead and make this rectangle, so it's a 2 by 1 rectangle, so this has an area of 2. And this is a 1 by 1, so 1 times 1 divided by 2, this has an area of 1/2. So you would have 1.5 plus 1/2, that's 2. Plus 2 is 4. So you should have 4 units squared on this one. Then on the next one, you can get, again, a bit more creative. There's more than one way to think about these, so please don't think that the way that I'm doing it is the only way. Like I might make a right triangle there, so that's a 2 by 1 triangle. Find that area. And then I would make another triangle here, and then a square there, and then I'd have my triangle here. And when you add up all of those areas, you should have 3.5 units squared. And like I said, 8, 9, and 10 is where it starts to get tricky. So you might have to start getting somewhat creative on some of these. Looking at 8, what I would do is I would probably just make a triangle here that's 1, 2, 3, 4 by 1. 4 times 1 is 4 divided by 2, so this has an area of 2. That's 2. And then I would just draw a line straight across so that you would have this triangle and this triangle, find those areas, and then draw one more line straight across here so you have a rectangle and a triangle. So now there are shapes that are manageable, and when you add all of those areas up, you should get 6.5 square units. 9 and 10 is where it gets really interesting. And again, there's several different ways, but let's take a different twist here. Let's look at it in the way, the opposite of kind of what we've been doing. So first of all, let's go ahead and make this rectangle a round. All right, and I believe it ends up being a 4 by 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so it ends up being a 4 by 4. So the area of that 4 by 4 is going to be 16. Now, in order to find the area of the gray, we are going to have to subtract out these areas here. So we're going to work on finding some of those areas, because if we subtract out these areas that I've highlighted in yellow, it will give us the area of the gray. All right, so now let's work through and try to find those areas that are in the yellow. And you can break it up however you want. And again, I would do this, so I'd have my right triangle there. And if you haven't done this, try this. Before I go on, I want you to pause. I want you to pause the video and try this on your own to see how you do. If you weren't able to get this. So when you go and break all of these up into, in this case, there's all triangles and there's one square there in the top left corner. When you add all of those up, right? So 1.5, 1.5 gives us 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You should get 7.5. So you're going to end up with 16 minus 7.5 square units, and that gives us 8.5. So we should have on number 9, 8.5 square units, whether you found the area of the gray or subtracted the area of the yellow to find the gray. And on number 10, if you haven't done number 10, pause the video and try that on your own. But on number 10, I'd highly recommend that you try it this way. Even if you already did it another way, try it this way. And go through and find the areas of these shapes in here. To see, not that one, to see if you can't figure out what those areas would be. All right, so again, subtract the area of the yellow from the total. That larger, in this case, it looks like it's a rectangle and not a square. And let's see what you get. So again, on this one, it's 12 because it's a 4 by 3. So this is a 4 by 3 rectangle, and so that's where the 12 came from. And then I added up the areas of the yellows, which came up to 3.5, and subtracted them, and my final answer is 8.5 square units. So on part B, find the area of one of the square parks you suggested in problem 1.2. Let's take a look at that. So here was one of the square parks that we had talked about. And so one way that we could find the area is if we do this. And we're just enlarging a square around that square, because we don't know these distances. I don't know what the distance from this point to that point is. So I need to figure out another way to find these areas. And so this is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a 4 by 1, 2, 3, 4. So then the area of the 4 by 4 is 16. Okay, and now let's go ahead and find the area of these highlighted triangles here. And they look to be all the same, so that should be fairly easy to do. So the area of those triangles, you would have, this has a length of 1, 2, 3 by 1. So this is 3 times 1 divided by 2. So this is 1.5, or 3 over 2. And this is 1, 2, 3. They're all 3 over 2. 3 over 2. And when you add these together, 1.5, 1.5, that makes 3. So 3 times 2, that's 6. So then the area of this red part is going to be 16 minus 6. And so the area is going to be 10 square units. And that's the area of this square right in there, where previously we didn't have any ways to find that area because we can't find the distance between 2 points that aren't on our grid, directly on our grid. So there we have the area. And then part C is just to put down in words what are some of the strategies. Your strategies might have been different than mine. If you were to find this shape on your own, what are some strategies you might have used? There might have been other ways to solve this. I don't know. This, to me, is probably the most direct, easiest way to do that. What are some of the strategies that you use back here? So write them down in words. It's very important that we take the time to write out in words what we're doing so we can better understand it. And then if our friends ask us how we got that, then we can better explain it to them. And that is it for 1.3, Finding Areas.